The thick black smoke rose up from what was left of Riverside Town. The fire was still burning, turning everything into ash and dust. This place used to be home to thousands of people, but now it looked like the end of the world had come. The dragon Fireleth came down through the smoky air, her black scales shining in the orange light of the fires below. She was very old, 3,000 years old to be exact. In all those years, she had seen many fights between dragons and humans, but this battle felt different somehow. It felt like the final fight. When Fireleth landed, her huge body was so heavy that it crushed the broken pieces of a guard tower underneath her feet. The air smelled terrible, like burned meat, melted metal, and death. But there was something else in the air too. Something that was still alive. Dragons have very strong senses, much better than humans. Fireleth could smell things and hear things that others could not. She followed this strange scent, stepping carefully through all the broken buildings and scattered pieces of what used to be people's homes. Her massive feet crunched on glass and wood as she moved through the destroyed town. Then she heard it, a soft sound that made her stop walking. It was quiet but steady, like a heartbeat. She put her enormous head down low and breathed in deeply through her nose, trying to figure out what it was. Under a wagon that had been flipped over, hidden by a heavy wooden beam that had fallen from a building, she found the source of the sound. There, wrapped up in a burned blanket but somehow not hurt at all, was a tiny human baby. The little boy was breathing slowly and peacefully, his small hands rolled up into fists while he slept. He looked very young, maybe only a few months old. His soft black hair still smelled like milk, the way babies do. Fireleth stared at this small human child, and her bright golden eyes showed feelings she had not felt for hundreds of years. She was confused and surprised. According to everything she knew, she should kill this baby right now. One small breath of fire would be enough to end his life quickly, and then the last person from Riverside would be gone forever. It would actually be kind to do this, because what chance did a baby have all alone in a world where dragons ruled everything? But something stopped her from breathing fire. Maybe it was because the baby looked so peaceful sleeping there, even though terrible things had happened all around him. Maybe it was because she could imagine how brave his mother and father must have been to hide him so well before they died fighting. They must have loved him very much to protect him even when they knew they were going to die. The huge dragon reached down very carefully with one of her giant claws. Dragons have claws that are sharp enough to cut through metal, but Fireleth moved as gently as if she was picking up a flower. She lifted the baby, still wrapped in his blanket, up from his hiding place. When she moved him, the baby opened his eyes just a little bit and looked up at her. Most people would be terrified to see a dragon's face so close, but this tiny child showed no fear at all. His dark eyes just looked at her with curiosity. Other dragons were still flying in circles above the burning town, but Fireleth did not call out to them or tell them what she had found. Instead, she opened her powerful wings wide and pushed herself up into the sky that was getting darker as night came. The baby did not cry or make any noise as they went higher and higher into the air. His small body was pressed against her chest, where her heart was beating like thunder in the distance. Down below them, Riverside kept burning. The flames would burn for days until there was nothing left but black dirt and memories. The people who had lived there were all gone now, and soon no one would remember their names or their stories. But flying ahead of them were the Dragon Mountains, tall and proud and older than anyone could remember. These mountains had been the home of dragons for thousands of years. No human had ever walked on those peaks and lived to tell other people about it. But tonight, for the first time in history, a human baby would see the secret places where dragons lived. This tiny child, who did not even have a name yet, was about to become something that had never existed before. He would grow up learning the ways of dragons while still being human inside. He would become a bridge between two worlds that had always been enemies. As Fireleth flew toward her mountain home with the baby safe in her arms, she did not know that she was carrying the future of both dragons and humans with her. 20 long years had gone by since that terrible night when the town of Riverside burned to the ground. The Dragon Mountains had become home to the strangest family anyone could imagine. The tiny human baby that Fireleth had saved was now a grown man. She had given him the name Kai, which meant fireborn in the old dragon language, because she found him surrounded by flames but somehow untouched by them. Standing at the rocky edge of their mountain cave, Kai watched the sun come up over the distant valleys below. The morning light painted everything in beautiful colors of gold and red. He was now 6 feet tall with strong muscles and hands that were rough from years of hard work. He looked nothing like the helpless baby Fireleth had carried away from the ruins so long ago. His dark skin had been toughened by the cold mountain winds, and his eyes seemed to hold wisdom that most people his age could never have. Living with dragons had changed him in ways that went much deeper than just his appearance. I had good luck hunting yesterday, Kai said to Thyroleth as he worked on preparing the huge elk he had killed. He spoke in the dragon language perfectly, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. His hands moved quickly and skillfully as he cleaned the animal, using techniques he had learned by watching Thyroleth for 20 years. The deer and elk are moving to new areas earlier than usual this year. Thyroleth looked at the young man she had raised as her own son, and she felt something that dragons rarely allowed themselves to feel, pride. But she would never say this out loud, because dragons were not supposed to have such gentle emotions. You are getting much better at tracking animals, she told him in her deep, rumbling voice. When you walked through the forest, you barely left any footprints or broken branches behind you. During all these years, Thyroleth had been Kai's teacher in everything important. She taught him how to hunt wild animals without making any noise that would scare them away. She showed him how to look at clouds and know what kind of weather was coming. She taught him how to find clean water to drink even in the driest places where nothing seemed to grow. Most importantly, she had told him the long, complicated history of both dragons and humans, all the old wars, all the reasons why the two peoples had been fighting and killing each other for hundreds and hundreds of years. But the most amazing thing about Kai was not just what he knew, but what he could do with his body. Living among dragons had given him abilities that no regular human had ever possessed. His reflexes were incredibly fast because he had spent years dodging the playful swipes of dragon claws that could easily cut a person in half. When Thyroleth and other dragons played rough games with him, he learned to move like lightning to avoid getting hurt. His stamina and strength were legendary because he had trained by trying to keep up with creatures who could fly through the sky for days and nights without stopping to rest. His hearing, sight, and sense of smell had become as sharp as a wild animal's because he needed these skills to survive in the dangerous dragon world. The dragons who patrol the outer edges of our territory have seen something troubling, Thyroleth said, though she tried to make her voice sound casual and unworried. But Kai had lived with her long enough to notice the small signs that showed she was actually concerned about something. There are more humans moving around in the valleys below than we have seen in many years. They are building new towns and training bigger armies. They seem to be getting braver about coming closer to our mountains. Kai stopped what he was doing and looked carefully at Thyroleth's face, reading her expression the way other people might read words in a book. After 20 years together, he could tell what she was thinking even when she tried to hide it. What do the other dragons want to do about this? The Dragon Council is getting tired of this long period of peace, Thyroleth admitted, and now her voice carried a note of sadness that she could not completely hide. Elder Vorthak, who is one of the most powerful dragons, keeps talking about something he calls the final cleansing. He believes that humans have become too many in number and too dangerous with their new weapons. He wants to attack them before they can attack us. The air between them seemed to grow heavy with things that neither of them wanted to say out loud. Kai knew that his very existence was a problem for many of the other dragons. They allowed him to live in the Dragon Mountains only because Thyroleth was so old, so powerful, and so respected that even the other ancient dragons would not dare to challenge her decisions directly. But this tolerance was not the same as acceptance, and Kai could feel that some dragons were becoming less and less comfortable with having a human living among them. What do you think we should do? Kai asked his adoptive mother, though he was afraid of what her answer might be. Thyroleth's bright golden eyes looked at him with an intensity that seemed like it could melt solid rock. When she spoke, her words carried the weight of 3,000 years of experience. I think the world is changing in ways that neither dragons nor humans fully understand yet. And I think it might be time for you to find out what kind of person you have become after all these years of living between two worlds. When the sun first appeared over the mountains, the Dragon Council gathered in the great amphitheater. This was a massive stone circle carved right into the mountain itself, where the most important dragon meetings had been held for thousands of years. Kai had never been allowed to see one of these gatherings before, but today Thyroleth insisted that he come with her. Many of the other dragons were angry about this, especially Elder Vorthak, who had been complaining loudly about bringing a human to their sacred meeting place. 12 of the oldest and most powerful dragons arranged themselves in a perfect circle around the flat stone platform in the center. These ancient creatures had lived for thousands and thousands of years combined. If you added up all their ages, it would be more than 30,000 years of experience, wisdom, and warfare. The sight of so many enormous dragons in one place should have made any human shake with terror, but Kai stood up straight and looked directly at them without showing any fear at all. How dare you bring this thing before our council? Elder Vorthak's voice was like thunder rolling across the mountains, full of anger that he was barely keeping under control. His red scales seemed to glow brighter as his rage grew hotter. Have you completely forgotten what his people did to us during the War of Brass Skies? Have you forgotten how many of our brothers and sisters they killed with their cursed metal weapons? Thyraletha's response was calm but firm, showing that she would not be intimidated even by another elder dragon. I have forgotten nothing, Vorthak. Not a single battle, not a single death. But I also have not forgotten that there is great wisdom in truly understanding your enemy, rather than simply hating them. For the first time since entering the amphitheater, Kai spoke up. His voice carried clearly across the enormous stone circle, reaching every dragon present. Honored elders, I humbly request your permission to speak before this great council. Several of the ancient dragons moved restlessly when they heard him, surprised by how perfectly he pronounced their difficult language. Most humans could barely speak a few words of dragon tongue, but this young man sounded like he had been born speaking it. Elder Vorthak breathed out a small jet of flame in contempt. So the pet thinks it can bark orders at the Council of Elders? This is what happens when we show mercy to humans, they forget their place. But Elder Sirathan, whose silver scales had grown dull with incredible age, raised her massive head with interest. Actually, let him speak. I find myself curious to hear what 20 years of living among dragons has taught this unusual human child. Kai stepped forward, moving away from Thyraletha's protective presence to stand alone in the center of the circle. Now he was surrounded by 12 of the most dangerous creatures in the world, but he showed no signs of backing down. You are debating whether to start another war against the humans, the people I was born among. You talk about final solutions and cleansing fires that will wipe them out completely. But I have to ask you something important. Have any of you actually considered what humanity has become during all the years since your last big war with them? Why don't you enlighten us, little human? Vorthak growled, his voice dripping with sarcasm and disrespect. Kai looked around the circle, meeting the eyes of each elder dragon before he continued. The humans have learned from every defeat you have given them. Their weapons have become stronger and more deadly. Their fighting tactics have become much more clever and sophisticated. They no longer just charge straight at you like they used to. They build their cities deep underground now, where dragon fire cannot reach them easily. They have spread out across the continents, so you cannot destroy them all in one attack. But most importantly, they have started studying dragons very carefully. They are learning how you think, how you fight, what you care about most, and how to use all of that knowledge against you. He gestured toward the assembled council with a sweeping motion of his arm. But look at yourselves. You sit here in this same ancient stronghold, following the exact same patterns of behavior that you have used for thousands of years. You make the same kinds of plans, you attack in the same ways, you think the same thoughts that your ancestors thought. You have become predictable. And when you are fighting an enemy as smart and adaptable as humans have become, being predictable is the most dangerous thing you can be. The silence that followed Kai's words was so complete that you could have heard a pin drop in the enormous amphitheater. Even the wind seemed to stop blowing through the mountains. Elder Sirathan was the first to break the silence. And what exactly do you think we should do about this situation? Kai took a deep breath before answering. Use me. I am something that has never existed before in the history of either of our peoples. I am a human who has been raised with dragon knowledge, dragon skills, and dragon ways of thinking. I can go to places where no dragon could ever go without starting a war. I can learn things that no dragon could ever learn. I can be your eyes and ears in a human world that is changing faster than you realize. A spy, Vorthak spat with disgust. You want us to trust our most important secrets to human treachery and lies. Not just a spy, Kai replied without hesitation. Something much more important than that. I could be an ambassador, a bridge between two worlds that have known nothing but war and hatred for centuries. The council would continue debating for many hours after that, but Kai had planted an idea in their ancient minds that would grow and change everything. The Dragon Mountains were about to experience something they had never known before, the possibility of peace. 3 months had passed since that historic meeting in the Dragon Council, and now Kai found himself standing at the edge of the human world for the first time since he was a tiny baby. Down in the valley below him stretched the trading town of Millhaven, with its wooden houses and stone walls looking so different from the wild, natural beauty of the Dragon Mountains where he had grown up. This was going to be the biggest test of his life. Could a human raised by dragons actually blend in with his own species? Fireleth had made sure he was prepared for this dangerous mission. His clothes looked expensive but not too fancy, the kind that a successful merchant might wear. His weapons were beautifully made but not so impressive that they would draw unwanted attention. To anyone looking at him, Kai appeared to be just another traveling trader coming to do business in Millhaven. But if you looked closely into his eyes, you might notice something unusual. They held a depth and wisdom that seemed far older than his 20 years, like someone who had seen and learned things that ordinary people could never imagine. The guards at the town gates were not very careful about checking people's identification papers. They barely glanced at the documents Thyroleth had helped him prepare before waving him through into the town. Within just a few hours of arriving, Kai had rented a room at the local inn and started the careful work of watching and listening to everything around him. He needed to learn as much as possible about how humans lived now, what they thought about dragons, and most importantly, how prepared they were for war. What Kai discovered during his first few days in Millhaven both amazed him and made him worry. The humans really had changed a lot since the last big war with the dragons. Their military technology had gotten much better. He saw weapons and armor that looked like they could actually hurt or even kill a dragon, something that would have been almost impossible in the old days. Even more impressive, their fighting tactics had evolved far beyond the simple strategy of charging straight at their enemies that humans had used for centuries. But the thing that surprised Kai the most was how good humans had become at gathering information. Within just a few days of careful listening, he realized that the merchants, travelers, and even ordinary farmers had created an unofficial but very effective spy network that covered the entire continent. These people shared news and gossip wherever they went, creating a system that could track dragon movements better than the dragons themselves realized. Those giant WMS are getting bold again, Kai heard a merchant named Troy tell his drinking companion one evening in the inn's common room. My cousin who lives up north saw 3 of them hunting in Thunder Valley just last week. I'm telling you, another war is coming real soon. You're absolutely right about that, the other man agreed, his voice heavy with worry. But this time we won't be caught unprepared like before. The king has trained a whole new group of warriors called dragon hunters, and they've got weapons that can supposedly punch right through dragon scales like they're made of paper. Dragon hunters. This was completely new information, and it made Kai's blood run cold. He made very careful mental notes about everything he heard regarding these specialized dragon-killing warriors. If what these men said was true, the dragons had no idea how much danger they might be facing. During his 3rd week in Millhaven, something happened that completely changed how Kai saw this whole situation. He was sitting in the inn's main room when he noticed a young woman crying quietly in the corner. Her name was Tasha, and she was holding a baby boy who couldn't have been more than 6 months old. When Kai carefully asked other people about her, he learned that her entire village had been destroyed in a recent dragon attack. She was now homeless, with nowhere to go and no family left to help her. As Kai watched Tasha gently rock her baby and whisper soft words to comfort him, he felt something like lightning strike his heart. This tiny child was exactly the same age that Kai had been when Thyroleth found him in the ruins of Riverside. This grieving woman could easily have been his own mother. That innocent baby could have been him, if things had happened just a little differently 20 years ago. The realization hit him like a physical blow. For the first time in his life, Kai truly understood that the war between dragons and humans was not some abstract concept or ancient history. It was real pain, real suffering, real families being torn apart on both sides. Dragons saw humans as a threat to be eliminated. Humans saw dragons as monsters to be destroyed. But neither side seemed to understand that they were all just living beings trying to protect the people they loved. That night, alone in his small room above the inn, Kai made a decision that would have shocked any pure-blooded dragon or human. Instead of just gathering intelligence for the Dragon Council, he began to develop a much more ambitious and dangerous plan. If he was truly meant to be a bridge between these two worlds that had been enemies for so long, then maybe it was time to find out if that bridge was strong enough to support the weight of real peace. He started writing letters, some to be sent to the Dragon Council, and others to human leaders. His hands shook as he worked, because he knew he was about. 6 months after Kai had begun his dangerous mission in the human world, a thick envelope arrived at the Dragon Mountains. The message inside contained exactly what the Dragon Council had asked for, detailed information about human military strength, their new weapons, and their battle plans that could help the dragons win any future war completely. But hidden within those pages was something that no dragon had ever seen before, a formal written proposal asking for a peaceful meeting between dragon leaders and human representatives to talk about ending their ancient war forever. That boy has completely lost his mind, Elder Vorthak announced loudly when he finished reading Kai's proposal. His voice echoed angrily through the stone halls of the dragon stronghold. Humans do not sit down and talk things through like civilized creatures. They only understand 2 things, conquering others or being conquered themselves. There is no middle ground with their kind. But Elder Sirathan, whose silver scale showed her incredible age and wisdom, spent much longer studying every word in Kai's detailed reports. Her ancient eyes moved slowly across the pages as she absorbed all the information. We cannot ignore what this young human has discovered, she said finally. His intelligence about their new weapons and battle tactics appears to be completely accurate based on what our own scouts have reported. And if his assessment is correct about their true military strength, then the next war between our peoples will cost us far more dragon lives than any conflict we have ever fought before. The meeting that Kai had somehow arranged was scheduled to take place in a very special location called the Neutral Grounds. This was a stretch of ancient forest that had remained untouched by warfare for thousands of years because both dragons and humans considered it to be sacred territory. Through months of careful negotiation and persuasion, Kai had convinced the human king to send 3 of his most important representatives to this meeting. The most significant of these was General William Jackson, who commanded the new Dragon Hunter military unit that had been specifically trained to fight and kill dragons. On the dragon side, 3 elders agreed to attend: Thyrolith, Elder Sirathan, and even the reluctant Elder Vorthak. On the day of the historic meeting, 2 groups that had been mortal enemies for countless generations found themselves facing each other across a peaceful forest clearing. The human representatives struggled to hide their terror at being so close to actual dragons without any weapons or armor to protect them. Meanwhile, the dragons had to fight against thousands of years of instinct that told them to simply end this foolish gathering with fire and claws, the way they had always solved problems with humans before. Kai stood alone in the center of the clearing, exactly halfway between the 2 groups. In that moment, he truly belonged to neither side completely, yet somehow he had become essential to both of their futures. We are all here today because the path we have been following for centuries leads to only one destination: the complete destruction of both our peoples, Kai began, his voice carrying clearly across the tense silence. If we fight another war with the weapons and tactics that both sides have developed, it will weaken dragons and humans so badly that neither species will be strong enough to claim any kind of meaningful victory. General Jackson stepped forward, his face showing the skepticism that most humans felt about this entire idea. What you are proposing is completely impossible, young man. Dragons have proven over and over again that they are nothing but destroyers and killers. How can we possibly trust creatures who burn our cities to the ground and murder our children without any mercy? Elder Vorthak's response came out as a deep rumble that seemed to shake the very ground beneath their feet. Trust? You dare to speak of trust? Your species has murdered our young dragons with those cursed metal weapons of yours. Humans spread across the land like a disease, destroying everything natural and beautiful. You are a plague upon this world that needs to be cleansed away. And yet, here I stand before all of you, Kai continued, his voice remaining calm despite the anger and hatred flowing around him. I was raised by dragons, but I was born human. I have seen the honor, wisdom, and nobility that exists in dragon culture. I have also witnessed the courage, creativity, and determination that makes humanity strong. Neither of our species is purely evil, and neither is purely good. Both dragons and humans are simply trying to survive and protect the ones they love in the only ways they know how. The negotiations that followed were some of the most difficult and emotionally charged discussions that anyone present had ever experienced. Ancient grievances that went back hundreds of years were brought up and argued about. Both sides expressed suspicions and fears that had been building up for generations. There were moments when it seemed like the whole meeting would collapse into violence, just as so many encounters between their peoples had before. But slowly, through Kai's patient work as a translator, not just of languages, but of completely different ways of thinking and seeing the world, a basic framework for coexistence began to take shape. It was not perfect, and everyone knew it would be fragile and difficult to maintain. But for the first time in recorded history, dragons and humans put their signatures on a treaty that promised to try peace instead of war. Years later, Kai stood on the balcony of a building that would have been impossible to imagine just a few years earlier, an embassy that housed both human and dragon representatives working together. Below him, the new city of Haven bustled with activity as members of both species conducted business, shared knowledge, and slowly began to see each other as something other than deadly enemies that needed to be destroyed. Thyrolith landed on the specially reinforced platform that had been built just for dragons, her massive form settling gently beside the young man she had raised. "Do you ever wonder if we made the right choice?" she asked him. "We gave up the simple certainties of war for all these complicated challenges of peace." Kai smiled and placed his hand on her scaled hide, thinking of the long journey that had brought them both to this moment. "Never," he answered. "This is exactly what I was meant to do, not to pick one side over the other, but to help build bridges between worlds that had forgotten how to talk to each other." In the distance, the sound of dragon songs mixed with human voices celebrating a harvest festival that both peoples now shared together, proving that even the oldest enemies could learn to become something better.